All right, everyone, we've got some good conversation in the chat already, but I would like to welcome everyone to Classics 160 B1. Meet the Ancients! I, of course, am your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are bringing the first half of the semester to a close. We are going to focus on the midterm exam. I'm going to answer any questions. Well, maybe I shouldn't say I'll answer any questions that you guys have, but I will do my best to answer relevant and fair questions about the exam in today's lecture. So let's go ahead, turn down the lights, fire up the projector for lecture 8.2, the midterm review. So here's the plan for today. We'll start with a few announcements. What I'd like to do during that time is tackle any questions you guys have about the logistics of the exam, right? The format of the exam, the logistics of the exam, that sort of thing. And then what we'll do kind of for the remainder of the course is go back through and cover everything we've talked about. And in doing so, what we'll try to do is highlight some of the major takeaway points from each of kind of the main sections that we've had so far. And the plan is to help you differentiate then between maybe the kind of very specific details that if you remember them, that's awesome and you should put them in your essay, but also kind of differentiate those details from the bigger picture takeaways that really are going to be important on the exam. So that's going to be our plan for today. All right, so let's go ahead and look at announcements. So I just got a question in the chat about whether I was jogging yesterday on the, what do you mean the Boulevard Road? I was jogging yesterday. So I bike ride on Wednesdays, but I go for a run on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So where did I go yesterday? I went down to, run down to the Santa Cruz River, you know? And then I go down from somewhere around Congress or so, and then go south to Star Pass. And then I come back up and come back, and I kind of live near campus here. So yeah, it was a beautiful day for a run. Anyway, I know hopefully you guys aren't stressing out because I'm talking about running instead of your exam. So go ahead, put your screen into speaker view. If you have a question, throw it in the chat for everybody today. You can disregard having to funnel this to your TA. Today is all about questions and answers. So if you have a question about the exam or how fast I was running or where I was running or what I'm drinking after my run, which happens to be a Kirkland Vitamin Rain Zero, mango flavored, feel free to put that in the chat. So hopefully you know by now, the midterm is this Friday during class time, okay? And so the way that's gonna work is you don't come to Zoom, there's no attendance, don't worry about any attendance, just go to D2L, and at noon, the midterm exam will be open, okay? And once you start that exam, you'll have 50 minutes to finish it. Now, with that kind of 50 minutes, that's gonna be your main constraint. You're more than welcome to use the notes that you've taken for this class. You're more than welcome to go back to any of the lectures, but you're gonna have a really limited amount of time to do that, right? You can't sit there for 3 days and watch every lecture we've had and slowly answer the questions as I talk about them, okay? So what you can do, the best thing you can do between now and then is organize your notes in a coherent way where you can find the information that you need. Now, if you have any DRC accommodations for the exam, I've gone through over the past 2 days and input all those. If you believe you should have accommodations and you're not seeing them or something along those lines, touch base with both me and the DRC, right? They have to be the ones to give the approval. And then once they do, I'll input the accommodations, but loop the three of us into a triangular conversation and we'll make sure that that happens. The study guides for this, go ahead and look on D2L under the table of contents. And then under that, there's the midterm and final exam folder. And under that, there's the study guides, both the kind of content-based ones with all the terms, and then also the potential essay questions. Okay, we've got a question in the chat in terms of Hellenistic period. The Hellenistic period is actually the period after Alexander the Great, and we'll cover this kind of towards the end of today, but really the takeaway point for that is that Alexander the Great's empire fragments, right, after his death. Remember, he's on his deathbed and he's like, I leave my empire to the strongest. And all his generals are like looking at him. They're like, am I the strongest? And what they do then is they all split off almost immediately and start trying to grab different parts of the empire that he put together. And for the next 300 years, those successors and their descendants end up doing battle with each other to try to recreate the empire as a whole. But it never succeeds. They're never able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And as a result, what ends up happening is because there's all this infighting, we get this mighty, powerful empire or burgeoning empire from the West called the Romans, which we'll talk about in the second half of the class. They're able to come in and pick off these successor kingdoms one by one, okay? And so the analogy I like to use is that the Hellenistic period, right, that time after Alexander the Great, is very similar to the show Game of Thrones. So if you've ever seen that, or if you've read the books, if you're still wondering whether George R.R. Martin is going to finish the series, I don't know. He keeps taking on these other projects, and I think we're all like, can you just finish writing the books? But the kind of premise of the whole thing is that the king on the Iron Throne dies, and then all these competitors kind of start fighting with each other, breaking apart the kingdom that had been a whole under the king on the Iron Throne. And as a result, it never really ends up working out. So that's kind of the parallel for the Hellenistic period. In terms of the name for Alexander's empire, I don't know, just call it the Empire of Alexander the Great. I guess you could kind of call it like the Macedonian Empire because he's from Macedon. But usually we just call it the kind of conquests of Alexander. And it's so short-lived. I mean, he does this. First of all, he's your age, right? By the time he gets to my age, he's been dead for several years. So he's your age, and over the course of like 10 years, he does the entire thing, and then he dies. So we maybe, I guess, call it the Macedonian Empire, but usually we just call it the Empire of Alexander. Okay, let's see. Can you tell us which questions are not going to be on the essay question? Let me see. I'll give you one. How about that? I'll give you one. Let me see if I can find my essay questions here. I'm gonna go figure out which ones I put on there. A quick question about the honors project. Don't worry about getting the next stage in. What we're going to do is once we get back after the exam, we'll touch base in more depth on that, where there's like a little less pressure with the exam. So for right now, everybody, including, whether you're doing it for honors or not, focus the next couple days on the exam. Do a really good job on that. And then we'll pick up with the honors project in earnest after the short break. All right. Hold on. Sorry, I got to go find my my essay questions. Okay, one of the questions that will not show up on the exam. I'll give you two of them, actually. Yeah? All right, so the first one that will not show up is question number 7. about whether democracies are doomed to be short-lived, right? So that's the comparative one between ancient Greece and Egypt. I think it's actually a really interesting question, but it's not going to be the question for this exam. Maybe we'll revisit it in the second half of the course once we start talking about Rome as well. But don't worry about that one. And you know, to be very honest, 10 isn't going to happen either, the one about Alexander. If we had more time to talk about Alexander, I think it'd be a really interesting question if we could get into a little bit more depth on who he is and how he operates. It is a really good question to think about whether he's more Greek or more kind of like a Near East, like a Greek leader or a Near Eastern monarch. But for this one, I think that would require too much outside research from what we've done in the class. So don't worry about those two. The other 8 are fair game. Think of those 2 as a little bonus for coming to the midterm review today. Alrighty. So, right, remember with the study guide, make sure to check out that first page, which is trying to give you a sense for the types and detail of questions that will show up on the exam. The other pages are going to give you kind of the terms that are fair game. It's long. It's going to be annoying or perhaps fascinating if you really enjoy the class. You're like, oh, I totally forgot about the Ushabtis in Egypt. They're so cool because they replace human sacrifice and they serve the king in the afterlife. So maybe you'll have fun with that. But it's a great way to ensure that you've got great notes going into the final. And then check out the essays themselves. Okay, so kind of like we did last time, I want to walk through everything. When did the course begin? What did we actually start with when we started with the history of everything? Okay, the origin of the universe. And when's the origin of the universe happening? Yeah, 13 to 14 billion years ago, 13.7 billion years ago. All those things in the chat are good. This is a great time to highlight when I'm asking about dates. It's not going to be like, did it happen 13.6 billion years ago, or 13.7 billion years ago, or 13.8 billion years ago? I'm going to try to give you things that are substantially different so that if you know generally the kind of right time frame, you're going to be in good shape. Now, naturally, as we get towards the more recent past, right? Once we get into like ancient Greece, it's not going to be like, did the wars with Persia happen in 13 billion years ago, or 1 billion years ago, or 480 BC, or 1995, right? Like, as we get towards the more recent past, those time frames will become narrower, but it'll still be on the time frame of like 100, 200 years difference so that you can differentiate. Okay, so we did start with something about 13.7 billion years ago, and then we eventually, right, got with the formation of the Earth. When's that happening? Harry's on the ball, right? Very good. And then we got to humans eventually. When are humans arising according to biological anthropologists? 200,000 years ago. Good. And again, the kind of point of knowing that, they're great facts for a cocktail party, but also it gives you a sense for how amazingly quickly, right, kind of culture and civilization has progressed since around 3000 BC, right? It gives you a really good sense for that kind of context. All right, so we tackled this, right? Anatomically modern humans, something around 200,000 years ago. And what are we doing for 95% of the human existence? We are walking around, that's exactly right. Trying to survive. Yeah, walking around and trying to survive. I mean, in large part, that's it. Trying to find some food, trying to find like a good looking lady or a nice looking dude so that you can have some babies, maybe trying not to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. This is your life for 190,000 years. And what what happens after that, right? What's the next kind of step in terms of kind of cultural or technological or social developments that really starts to change things? So Hunter's put the Neolithic Revolution and what's happening in that revolution. Yeah, we got farming. We've got people settling down. That's exactly right. We've got people starting to breed animals. You've got it, right? It doesn't sound like it's that exciting at the time, but this is hugely important, right? We talked about this on Wednesday a little bit. It's hugely important because it starts this cycle, moving from a little bit of a surplus to food stability, which allows for population growth. And not just growth, right? But like it allows things to not completely collapse every time there's some sort of climate issue, right? Drought or famine or something along those lines. And then the big key down there is that leads to the specialization in technological advances, right? The idea that we can have, I mean, can you imagine? I can't even imagine what my life would have to be like if I like had to teach you guys, but then also had to go farm my own food. And then like, I don't know, build my car if I wanted to drive somewhere. Like this would be crazy if we had to do everything. And so it's that specialization that allows for new developments, and then the cycle goes and goes and goes and goes. It looks like Professor Ruby is over here. She's jumping around. You want to come up here, Professor Ruby? Come on. Nope. She's got a towel, and she's very excited about it. Okay, so, very good. Now, with the Bronze Age, we get an entirely new set of developments, right? What are some of the developments that we're getting there? Harry, you got it, right? Writing, art, political hierarchies, religious hierarchies, actual bronze. That's a big one in the Bronze Age. Good. One of the things we didn't talk as much about on Wednesday were some of the specific civilizations. So we started with the Near Eastern civilizations, right? And what kind of region are we looking at in those areas? Like where, I don't know, geographically, where are we looking for the Sumerians or the Akkadians or the Babylonians? Modern day Middle East, good. Mesopotamia. Anybody remember what Mesopotamia translates as? Yep, that's exactly right. The Tigris and Euphrates River valleys. That's super important there. Yeah, it's the middle of the two rivers, right? It's a Greek word, meso meaning middle, and potamia meaning rivers. It's the land between the two rivers. And remember, we saw that one of the reasons that's so important is because these rivers allow for irrigation, which helps with that kind of cyclical process we just looked at. But it also leads to kind of the need for coordination for large-scale projects, right? You need somebody kind of organizing the irrigation process and then other people carrying it out. All right, very good. And with the Bronze Age, this is starting around 3000 BC. And this is kind of in addition to these different developments, the other thing we see is we start to see social stratification. And what I mean there is that not only are people specializing and starting to do different things, but it kind of becomes a hierarchy, right? And in many parts of the world, it has to do with like, you know, people either very poorly paid free labor or slave labor that kind of serves as the economic core of these different civilizations. Okay, so with the Sumerians, what was it? Somebody mentioned monumental architecture there. What type of monumental architecture do we get with the Sumerians? Ziggurats, right? And they're kind of actually a mixture between these political and religious, kind of sort of pyramid-like structures. All right, good. After the Near Eastern civilizations, we started talking about Egypt. And when we're talking about Egypt, it's getting going right around the same time, right around 3000 BC. And it's known by these like kingdoms, right? So the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom. what's the deal with the Old Kingdom? What do we have with the Old Kingdom? What do we associate with it? That's right, Ava, you got it, right? Like, and Leticia, the Old Kingdom is old. There's no denying that. Yeah, one of the crazy things is that it's the Old Kingdom that's the age of the pyramids. I mean, these are some of the longest lasting, most impressive structures that mankind has ever created, and this is dating back to the earliest days of Egypt. Very good. And then in the Middle Kingdom, what we see is we kind of see a change in the way that the pharaohs portray themselves. How does that evolve? Yeah, that's right, Isabella, right? Like, so one of the things that ends up happening in the kind of Middle Kingdom is the king is still considered divine, but during the Old Kingdom, the king is very far removed from anything to do with the regular population. And during the Middle Kingdom, one of the things that happens is that the pharaoh starts to portray himself or herself as a kind of a shepherd of the people, right? Somebody who's taking care of the people and who's showing strain on their face because of how much work they have to put in on behalf of their people. They do make bad pyramids too. One of the cool ones is, I forget which pharaoh it was, but he builds this thing called the Black Pyramid because it had some black stone involved with it, and it kind of melts down because it's also made of mud brick. But it's one of these ones that's like booby-trapped. So like when you get inside, there are different things where it's like, you know, you step on something and like sand starts falling down. So really cool kind of stuff there. And then in the New Kingdom, where do we shift the focus in the New Kingdom? What are the things that you would associate with New Kingdom Egypt? Caitlin, exactly, right? Part of it is expansion. So expansion is happening, outside the traditional Nile River Valley. So south into the Sudan, west into Libya, kind of east and north into the Levant. Excellent. We've got Hatshepsut, right, the female pharaoh, who it's like, this isn't some kind of time of chaos where somehow a female perhaps like happens to gain the throne. She's like one of the most powerful rulers in all of Egyptian history. Yep, we've got Amenhotep IV. He changes his name. What's his new name? Akhenaten, right? The beloved of the Aten. And he changes like everything, right? He's like, all of a sudden, the traditional Egyptian pantheon is gone. We'll now worship the sun disk. And who's Akhenaten's successor? That's right, Caitlin. Good. Yes, Nicole, Caitlin, Kellen, you guys are all correct. Ava, King Tut is the successor, right? And while we know him today, right, most people think of King Tut as like being awesome because we have his tomb. And that is really, really awesome. The reason he was important in ancient Egyptian history is because he's the one who kind of brings religion back to the traditional way, or the traditional pantheon of Egyptian religion. And somebody else mentioned in the chat as well that one of the big things that we get during the New Kingdom in Egypt is this shift away from pyramids as being kind of the focus of monumental architecture towards temples. And that's absolutely true, right? So if you were talking about that, you'd be thinking of Karnak and Luxor, right? These massive, massive complexes to the Egyptian gods. All right, so I just got to note that my internet connection is a little unstable, and I'm not sure why that is, but if it is, I apologize. And I'm recording this locally on my computer, and I'll put it on YouTube. So if anything cuts out, feel free to check that. The review will be up by the end of the day. Now, one of the crazy things, right, is that these Bronze Age cultures, we almost totally missed like two of these, right? The Aegean ones, right? The Minoans and the Mycenaeans. What's the deal with the Minoans? Where are we talking about? Where are we located with the Minoans? Yeah, the island of Crete. Very good. And why are they called the Minoans? Why aren't they called the Cretans? Yeah, right? They're named after the mythical King Minos. You got it. Good, good, good. And they're very associated, very closely associated with the bull. And we see that in frescoes and pottery and little sculptural figurines, these horns of consecration where they'd make sacrifices. Very, very good. And what about the Mycenaeans, right? We've got the Mask of Agamemnon here. What's one of the things that we would associate with the Mycenaeans? The Lion's Gate at Mycenae, you got it. The Cyclopean Walls, spot on. Very, very good. Linear B tablets. And what do those tablets tell us? Militaristic culture, right? A lot of the material culture we get from Mycenae is based on these swords and helmets and armor. Very good. The Mask of Agamemnon. There actually is debate about whether this is actually ancient or not. Yeah, that's right, Harry. Good. They tell us about market transactions and kind of or economic transactions, right? And what do we learn from that? What do we learn about the Mycenaean economy from those tablets? That's my other research, Kellen. Yeah, like cows and animals are important, right? Allie, you've got it here, right? What we're learning from this is that the economy of the Mycenaean world was in large part redistributive, right? So what we think we learned both from the palaces but also from the tablets is that it seems like goods were flowing to the palace and then the palace was redistributing them to the people. And that actually works fairly well in the sense that that allows for greater specialization, right? So if you're good at growing olives, grow the crap out of some olives, right? If you're great at making wine, make some delicious wine. And it allows people to do what they're best at, which allows them to produce the most of it, which allows kind of everybody to get some once it gets redistributive. Excellent. Very, very good. Okay, now we can move on. One of the crazy things that ends up happening, right, is that this all comes crashing to a halt right around the same time, right? Right around 1200 BC. And Caitlin, you've got it. The traditional explanation, we've got these sea peoples coming around just laying waste to some of the greatest cities of the Bronze Age, right? And how did that explanation evolve over time? Kind of more recently, how have we started to think about what's happening and why this is happening during the 12th century BC? That's right, Leticia, right? It breaks down economic networks. Very good. The economic networks prevent you from getting things like tin, which you can't make bronze anymore. Very good. Trading's interrupted. Incredible time of like volcanic and earthquakes, natural disasters. Very good. Famine leads to internal rebellion. So it's a mix of all these things that you guys are saying. This is exactly right? Our new theory, kind of the more recent theory, is what we'd call like a systems theory, about how like one thing leads to another, and it's actually a lot of different explanations that are causing this kind of widespread destruction during the 12th century. And then we go into a period called the Dark Ages, right? And why do we, like, what's happening? During the Dark Ages, what's going on? Why are they dark? Writing disappears. That's exactly right. Very good. What else? Trade diminishes, right? So we can tell that archaeologically. You can go excavate sites, and all of a sudden where maybe like 10% of the stuff you found came from somewhere else back in the Bronze Age, all of a sudden now it's less than 1% or something like that, right? So you can trace that archaeologically and statistically. Burials get poorer, right? No more palaces for this redistributive style of economy. The Age of Heroes, right? In large part, kind of what Homer is doing when he's writing about the kind of Trojan War. He's trying to write about the Bronze Age, but it happens to be a lot of the cultural attributes of the Dark Ages that actually get kind of put into the text. Yeah, and there is kind of an increased level of equality. And that's one of the interesting kind of questions. It's not something that you need to know for the test here, but with my focus on the economy, it's something that I think about. And it's like, generally we would think that having a greater level of equality is good. But is it worth kind of everybody's quality of life? Are we able to, like, is it better to have people being more equal, but everybody kind of living at a slightly lower level of development? Or do we want higher levels of inequality, but kind of a higher floor and higher ceiling? I don't know. I don't have an answer to it, but it's an interesting question. That's right, Juliana. The pottery and architecture becomes super lame. Don't let the Dark Age Greeks hear you say that, but I agree with you. All right, very good. Now, Archaic Greece, right? The big takeaway with Archaic Greece is, like, all the things that we associate with ancient Greece, they frequently start, right? They have their origins in the Archaic period. Let me shrink myself down a little bit so you can see the dates here, but this is starting right around 800. Okay, so what are some of the developments that we've got? We've got the Olympics, you got it. Iconographic art, that's right. Writing comes back, very good. Yep, we got stone temples for the first time, colonization, the Olympics, you mentioned that, sculpture, right? Black figure vase painting, democracy begins. So, like, many people would say that, oh, like the pinnacle of Greek temple building or the pinnacle of Greek pottery happens during the classical period. And that could be very true, the pinnacle of Greek sculpture. But these things all have their start in the Archaic period. Now, so Greece is kind of like, starting around 800, they're really on this, like, upward trajectory in terms of, like, their population, in terms of wealth, in terms of kind of complexity, social complexity. And eventually, though, they get embroiled in a series of wars. So when we talk about explaining why this is happening, right, we talked about a move towards equality. And some of what we talked about in terms of explaining why that occurs is, 1, a more equal distribution of wealth, 2, a more equal style of warfare, and 3, a more equal approach to religion and the gods, right? That idea that anybody can make a sacrifice to the gods. Now, when we get to Greek democracy, can we mentioned this on Wednesday, but can somebody else just mention quickly what the big difference is here between kind of Greek democracy and our democracy? That's right, not a republic. In ancient Greece, the male citizenry, yeah, and that's right, it's a different group of people who can actually do this. So it's the male citizenry, and they go vote on kind of the issues themselves, rather than voting on or electing people to make laws about those issues. Excellent. Now, Greece gets embroiled in a war with Persia between 480 and 479, or sorry, 490 and 479 BC, right? And we've seen this map a bunch of times. There's piddly little Greece, and here's the mighty Persian Empire. What were some of the wars that we wanted to kind of keep in mind if we were writing about this? Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, you got it. Very, very good. You guys have heard these a bunch of times. And what's kind of the key takeaway here is that Greece, I mean, it's a huge upset. Nobody thought Greece was actually going to win this thing. But it's also not like, it's not like Greece like destroys Persia right now, right? Like afterwards, the map still looks like this, right? It's just Persia wasn't able to expand and tackle Greece. But what does happen is that Athens emerges from this as the dominant power at sea. Sparta emerges as the dominant power on land. Sicily over in the west is making tons of bank from selling grain. And so we get this kind of flourishing, right? This golden age of classical Greece that occurs in the aftermath of the Persian Wars. And we saw how many, these aren't necessarily completely new developments that are happening, but they're an evolution of what was going on in the Archaic period, right? So philosophy changing from asking how the world operates to kind of how we should behave as people, right? Or art emerging from kind of these lifelike but stiff sculptures to more fluid, idealistic, realistic sculptures. The classical period ends with Alexander, right? We'd say the Golden Age might end with the Peloponnesian War, that the Golden Age was maybe that just 4th or 5th century. But the classical period traditionally would be like 480 or 479, end of the Persian Wars, to the end of Alexander the Great, 323. And we saw that one of the major developments of this period, right, was the architecture on top of the Acropolis. And so what were the buildings we've got? What's this one right here? That's right, we got the Propylaea, right, the front gate. And this tiny little guy here, or girl, I guess. That's the temple to Athena Nike, very good. And what's the big mama over here? You got it, that's the Parthenon. And last but not least, what do we have with this strange looking building over there? That's the Erechtheion. You got it. Great. So those are, some of the monuments that we've tackled in a little bit more depth throughout the course. Very, very good. Now what's crazy is that this kind of golden age, the classical period lasts longer and lasts through the Peloponnesian War, but that kind of golden age of flourishing that we associate with the 5th century, I mean, it's really quite short. The Greeks can't help but start fighting each other, and that happens through the Peloponnesian War. And remember, that happens in 3 different phases. The first one is the Spartans coming up to attack Athens, but Athens hides behind its walls, right, and is able to use those long walls to get out to the sea. The second stage is Athens decides it's a good idea to go try to take over the island of Sicily, and that's a horrible idea, and their army and their fleet are demolished. And then what they do is they melt down their gods, right? They go into the Parthenon and take the statue of Athena and melt it down and use the metal from that to build a new fleet. They're successful at Arginusae in 406, and then they push their luck, and they're defeated 2 years later at Aigospotamoi, which literally translates as I think it's like the Goat River or something like that. And they are destroyed by Sparta. Sparta makes them disband their fleet, right? Gets rid of their democracy, and we are ushered into a new phase in this 4th century. And in the 4th century, rather than Athens being dominant, right, we've got this kind of constant battle between Thebes and Athens and Sparta, and what they do is they basically change their alliances based on who's most powerful at the time. So if Athens is most powerful, Sparta and Thebes will team up against it. If Sparta's most powerful, Athens and Thebes gets together. Athens and Sparta will team up against Thebes, right? They don't care about their history. They just don't want any of the third one to be too powerful. But we saw that there were 2 kind of outcomes of these Peloponnesian Wars in the kind of long run in the 4th century. One is that people became, not when I say people, I mean individuals became very, very wealthy. And 2 is that there are new areas that kind of get brought into the Greek world. And Macedon, right, up here in the north, is one of the major ones. We can see the wealth in things like burials of individuals, right? This is classical Greece over here. You're a wealthy dude, you have a nice little stela and sculpture of you set up on your tomb. 100 years later, you're a wealthy dude, you build an enormous monument with statues all over it to yourself. So we see the rise of the power of the individual. And perhaps nowhere is that better exemplified than that region of Macedon, where we get Philip II, who is the one to start kind of taking the battle to the other Greek city-states, and he's able to defeat them. And it's his son, well, before we get to his son, he's about to go take on the Persian Empire when he's killed, stabbed in the back at his own wedding. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about why this happened. One of the popular ones is that his third marriage was to the mom of Alexander, and that she didn't like the idea that he was getting married again, because then maybe it wouldn't be Alexander who would become heir to the throne. So she organized this at his fourth wedding. Either way, Alexander does take over, and he's picking up right where his dad left off, right? He is going to take the fight to Persia, and in particular, the leader of Persia at the time, this guy right here, Darius III, and the Persian Empire is still flourishing, right? When we're looking at most of the area in green, everywhere except for like right over here, this is all Persian Empire at the start. Persia's doing really, really well. But Alexander starts going in at Granicus and then making his way through here. And the whole way, right, you hear story after story of him being not just at the back of the battle, being a brilliant like strategist. You have him on like the front lines being the first person to like throw a spear at the enemy. And we see that in different kind of ways. We'll see one of the things that happens is at the site of Issus, right before we get this quote, is that he's actually able to take his cavalry around the side of the battle, and he just charges straight at the Persian king. And in the end, he ends up taking like the royal tent. He ends up taking the royal family, minus the king. The king's run away. He ends up taking the royal, he's like bathing in the Persian king's bathtub. He starts wearing the purple robes of the Persian king. Alexander is he's incredibly brave, but he's also kind of a wild man. And then the Persian king comes to him begging for mercy. And Alexander says, you are not worthy to talk to me as an equal. He goes down into Egypt, and the takeaway from there, right, is that the Egyptian oracle, right, the Greco-Egyptian oracle, tells him that he's the son of a god and he himself is divine. And then he's able to finally defeat the Persians once and for all at the site of Gaugamela. And again, militarily, this is kind of a cool move. What he ends up doing, it's a reverse pincer move. And so he has his flanks fade backwards. And so from the Persian perspective, it looks like they're not very long. But when the Persians encounter the two flanks, they kind of meet more resistance than they expected. And they have to dedicate more and more of their army to those flanks. And what that does is it opens up kind of a gap in the center. And the Greeks are able to charge through and defeat the Persians. In the aftermath, Alexander goes around, chases down Darius for good, and kills him. He then burns the Persian capital at Persepolis. And he starts kind of acting like, some hybrid character between a Greek military leader, a Greek political leader, a Persian political leader. But the Persian political leader is also kind of like a god, right? And it's kind of a theocracy where he gets his right to rule from the gods or is himself a god. He starts wearing the Persian diadem and these Persian robes. He starts wearing pants instead of the Greek kind of toga. So in all these kind of ways, he's blending Greek and Persian. And the Greeks are starting to get very wary of this whole thing, right? The Greeks are built around this idea of equality. And we've got this guy trying to act like a king. We will have attendance today. I'll say it at the end and I'll leave it open for 10 minutes longer. Let me go ahead and open it up now. Just 1 second here. All right, so I'll give you the answer at the end of the class today, and then you'll have till 1 o'clock to go ahead and input the answer. Okay, so Alexander makes it all the way to India after defeating the Persians. The guy is pushed from Greece to India. This is an insanely large area of conquest in 10, 13 short years. And in India, he's able to win a victory. He's injured in that victory. And afterwards, his troops are like, we're done here, right? Like, we are no longer interested in going forward. Like, we want to go home. We want to see our families. They are ready to mutiny. And Alexander makes the very poor decision to take them back through the Gedrosian desert. This is not a place where you want to be stuck. It's not a place where you want to march through. And across this desert, he's losing a massive amount of his troops. And he himself makes it back to the site of Babylon. So he never makes it back to Greece. He makes it back to Babylon in like modern day Iraq. And there, he's on his deathbed, right? He's drank something that's reacted poorly with him. Some people say he drank himself to death. That's where he says that, you know, he's leaving his empire to the strongest. And this ushers in, right, the aftermath of Alexander is what we call the Hellenistic period, which translates as like the Greek-ish period, okay? Meaning that it's like kind of sort of Greek, where it's a hybrid of Greek and other, right? And so that's what happens when the Greeks spread into all these other parts of the world. And we talked earlier today about how this is kind of a parallel for Game of Thrones, where the mighty king on the Iron Throne dies, and then all his successors compete together to try to reunite the empire. And this is what it looks like on a map, all right? And so we've got the Antigonids over here in Asia Minor, the Seleucids over in the Near East, the Ptolemies in Egypt. Ptolemy is actually interesting. He steals the body of Alexander himself because it was a tradition at the time in parts of these areas that if you had the body, like the person who had the body would become the successor. So he steals it and he runs off to Egypt with it. And for 300 years, these different groups and kingdoms compete with each other. But they aren't able to ever reunite what Alexander had created. And in that competition, they kind of weaken themselves and allow for the mighty power from the West to come in and take them all over one by one, right? Rome will team up with a particular successor kingdom against another, conquer that one, and then team up with another one against the one they had just paired with and conquer that one. And we will hear all about that in the second half of the course. Alexander, that's a good question. Alexander did still use the phalanx. The phalanx warfare under Alexander was a very, very efficient style of warfare. Okay, so attendance for today is blue. I don't know why Heracles is feeling blue. You've got until 1 o'clock to go ahead and put that in for today. Over the next 2 days, make sure you study, organize those notes. And then what we're going to do, and I will email out about this afterwards, but what we're going to do is next week, this is not spring break. We cannot call this spring break. We're going to have a series of asynchronous classes next week where your work is going to be to watch the movie Alexander, and it is work. It's not a popular movie. And most people do not like this movie. But it does, I think, a kind of cool example of showing the life and conquest of Alexander, especially if you've got some historical background. So you're going to watch that over the course of next week at your leisure. I will put, sorry, Eric, you got to watch it. I will put the link to this up on D2L under Movie Week so that you guys can all watch that. And then the next time we're back in person is going to be a week from Monday.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Just a question for the exam. Are the multiple choice questions gonna be the grade for those? Is gonna be posed automatically after they complete those? Because remember that we have 50 points for those, and then we have 50 points for the essays. So it's to clarify that students will not get their full grade right away because we, the TAs, need to grade the essays after.
Yeah, the way I've got it set up is that's always been like a point of confusion. So I think the way I've got it set up now, or what I've tried to do, is set it up so you're not going to get any grade right when you finish it, right? Okay. You will get your grade. We're going to grade these things over the course of a week, right? So by a week from Friday, you should have your final grade, but you will get that all at once.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right, everyone, good luck on the exam. Hold on, any final questions here? Essay question 3, what do you mean by artifact? Yeah, it could be the Mask of Agamemnon. It could be the Parthenon. I will count a structure as an artifact. It could be the Narmer palette. It could be a Greek vase with Ajax and Achilles on it. Any of those things would count as artifact. How are we turning in the essay? The essay is something that you type in D2L, right? So if you've scripted out 10 different essays, you can copy and paste it in there. That's fine, right? If you've done that work ahead of time, awesome. I'm happy. You have worked really hard, and that's great. One final comment on the way that it goes, right? It is chronological. You're going to get 20 questions that are in chronological order, multiple choice. Then you're going to get 5 visual questions based on like an image, right? It could be the Parthenon and I'm asking you what it's called or something along those lines. Those kind of restart in chronological order. So 21 would be back kind of towards the beginning. 25 will be more recent. And then question 26 is the essay question. Okay, again, no specific length on the essay. What I'd like to see is that you're spending about 25 minutes on that, about half the exam. I think 100 words would be towards the very short end of it. 1,000 words would be towards the very long end of it. Somewhere in the middle is going to be fine, and that's going to, then kind of based on the quality of it, it could be a little shorter, it could be a little longer. It'll depend on quality. So yes, you have 50 minutes for the essay and the 25 multiple choice questions. And you want to try to split your time about that way. About a minute per question for the multiple choice, hopefully quicker. And then about 25 minutes for the written part of the exam. All right, everyone, I'm rooting for you. Good luck on the exam. Have a wonderful week next week with the asynchronous classes in the movie. I'm sorry, Eric, you'll survive. And I will see you back here a week from Monday. All right? All right. Bye, everyone.